impact way beyond
Yeah.
just even this horrible event, you know. So,
Yeah. So the recording has started.
oh, great.
I just saw that, yeah.
So how do we know the recording has started?
Oh, there was just a little flash on the screen.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking at it. Alrighty. Oh, and then I use these arrows in the bottom to go to the next slide. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll still give people a few more minutes.
Conference recording started.
Good morning. This is Martha Ackman with the Hospital Quality Institute, and we're going to get started in just a moment. I see there is a question in the chat box from Will that you may use the computer for audio. The feedback we've received is people tend to get a little bit better reception if they dial in. So that's why we recommend going ahead and dialing in, but you may also use the computer itself. It just is 12 o'clock straight up, so we'll give just one more minute for people to join our call. Okay, good afternoon. This is Martha Ackman from the Hospital Quality Institute. I am one of the clinical improvement advisors that is working on the CalHEN 2.0 project. And I'd like to welcome all of you to this second webinar in our series of coaching webinars on preventing patient falls with injury. Thank you each for joining us today. And I want to just give you a little reminder that all lines are open. So if you please mute your phone, if you have a lot of background noise, and also I just want to give a little reminder to please not put us on the hold button, because then we will all hear your introductory music. So. Now we can go to polling question number 1. And as we get started, I'd like to ask who's in the room. And what we found last time is that we had a lot of people in the other category. So I would ask you, if you are in the other category, to go ahead and chat in the little chat box where you're from. If you're from quality, patient safety, maybe a patient family advisor. We just want to have a good sense of who is on the webinar so that we can be sure that we meet everyone's needs. So I'll give you just a couple more minutes, or I mean another couple seconds to finish that. Okay, so we can see that we have a handful of frontline staff, and we have about 60% are from management and 50% from other. And I see a few of those other people have chatted in that they're from quality and patient safety. And again, just want to thank you all for joining the webinar today. So I wanted just to review our objectives for the webinar are to extend the application of fall and fall injury prevention interventions to specific populations, to restate the critical program elements to reduce repeat falls and preventable falls, and to compose strategies to reduce barriers and enhance facilitators to short-term and long-term program implementation. So today is our second of these coaching webinar series. Last month was our first session, and we talked about the post-fall management and patient engagement. And today we're going to be talking about protection from injury and the incorporation of the unit-based champions. Before we get started with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information to put it in perspective. We went over a lot of the new research the last time. Today, I wanted to share with you that we have 162 hospitals in the California HEN that are reporting on falls with injury. And they are, and of those, our baseline rate was 0.59 per 1,000 patient days. That was our baseline for CalHEN 2.0. Today, our most current data shows that our average is 0.63 per 1,000 patient days. So this does represent an overall increase from our baseline rate of falls with injury. So again, that is why we really want to look at how we can protect our patients from injuries when they fall and establish the role of the unit champion on the journey to eliminate falls with harm. So that takes us to our polling question number 2. As we said last month, we talked about the post-fall huddle. So if we can look at the first question, and if we could bring up that poll, the first question is, on your unit, did a patient fall since our last webinar? And so there are some of you that are, we see that a few of you did have a patient fall. We'll give you another 10 seconds. Great. So we can see there about 4 patients have fallen since the last webinar. Can we pull up the second polling question? And for those of you that did say yes, you had a patient fall since our last webinar, did you include the patient in the post-fall huddle? So as we all may recall, we had 4 people that had, and 3 of them have incorporated the patient in the post-fall huddle. What I would like to ask is, what if you could chat in what you learned from the patient, for those of you that did include the patient in your post-fall huddle. And so what was different for the patient this time? What did you learn when you conducted those post-fall huddles? So I know a couple of you are typing in, so we will look forward to seeing those responses. In the meantime, I want to take a minute to introduce Patricia Quigley. She is our subject matter expert on post-fall and fall management and prevention. She is, as you may recall, a nurse consultant, retired associate director with the Patient Safety Center of the VA, and is a clinical nurse specialist and nurse practitioner in rehab. Her contributions to patient safety, nursing, and rehab are evident at a national level, with emphasis on clinical practice innovations designed to promote elders' independence and safety. She's nationally known for her program of research in patient safety, particularly in fall prevention, and the Falls Program research agenda continues to drive research efforts across health services and rehab researchers. Pat has been really an integral piece of moving fall prevention forward. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Pat.
Oh, thank you so much, Martha, for that warm introduction. It's just so wonderful to be with you and Shweta and everybody that's on the call today. And I am not seeing any of those chats that people might have entered in relationship to that post-fall huddle question. Are you seeing any of those yet, Martha? Or
I am, Pat.
You know,
and
is it in the? I might not be seeing the right box for that. Is it everybody that would be answering that one?
It is everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, everyone. It's under the everyone, and what it seems to be pretty consistent that the patients didn't want to bother us, so that's why they tried to get up on their own. And one of the participants even said that the patient was that they were really relieved to see that the staff were not cross with them, and that they really appreciated the insight that they got from the staff when the staff came back and asked them, or included them in the post-fall huddle. So I think that what we can take from that, there was some reservations last time about how we can invite the patient to be part of that huddle, and it is clear that from the responses that we got that the patients are very appreciative to be part of that.
Yeah. You know, that is so much in agreement, and I'm so glad for those of you on the call that are chatting in to share that, because, you know, we know when we gather with patients after they fall that part of why they sometimes, I think, are even reluctant to tell us that they fall if we don't find them down is that they feel terrible that you know, they know it's going to be a lot of work and they don't want anybody to get in trouble, and then they're also embarrassed. So there's really a fine art to being able to handle their engagement in that post-fall huddle process. So I want to congratulate all of you who have tried to do this and are making progress at trying to involve them in the post-fall huddle, because that's the only way you can figure out why they fell, just to try and, you know, help discover, use that deep dive discovery to try and figure out what was that root cause and what was different. So for our colleague or two that has yet to engage the patient, you know, there are probably some circumstances for that to happen, or if there's any issues that you have and you want to chat about it privately, I'd be happy to do that. So colleagues, I am just delighted to be with you, be able to be with you for this second webinar with Martha. And before I get started on protecting people from injuries, serious injuries, and the unit-based champions, I just know that you know that I come from Florida, and I know that you are with me and giving our hearts of prayers to the terrible tragedy that just happened a few hours ago, early Sunday morning in Orlando, and the senseless loss of life and injury and all the people that are afraid now. So I know that, you know, the country is with us in prayer. So I know everybody's sharing their own sense of silence and prayer. So with that, I know Martha and I have already talked about it, but I just want to say thank you for your wishes and your prayers. So here we are going forward, and I love being able to talk about this injury reduction because, as you had heard just very briefly from Martha's remarks, that the injury rate has, you know, it just went up a little, but it just takes one injury to sometimes make that go up, because they really are quite rare when you see the 0.63 falls with injury per 1,000 patient days. And indeed, that's all injuries that you're reporting. So what we want to be able to do is continue to move in a very robust way on anything we can do to protect people from injuries, because remember, we can't prevent all falls. But what we want to do is to make sure that if someone does fall, that they don't get injured. So the work that I'll be sharing with you is the work that we were able to do at the VA where I was and the Institute for Healthcare Improvement for going after a population-based approach to injury reduction. So that'll be the first part. And then the second part will be really focusing on unit-based champions. And we spent a little bit of time talking about this when we were together in our conferences, but I love to say that, you know, that if you're trying to change practice, it is not for the faint of heart. So when you're trying to look at how to be able to maximize success at the unit level, at the point of care, with every patient, working with every staff on your unit, the unit-based champions really have emerging evidence of effectiveness. They're grounded in innovation diffusion. So I love being able to talk with you about that intervention as well. So think of each one of these as an intervention, something that you're doing different. So we'll go ahead and get started. In protecting people from injuries, this means that we're going to be looking at interventions that we're going to implement that helps to create a safe environment. You want to be able to reduce the environmental risk that's associated when people fall, the amount of trauma that is sustained when people fall. And that's why we look at environmental assessments, using floor mats, the hip protectors to protect hips from fracturing when someone has that lateral fall, as well as helmets to be able to reduce the risk of someone having trauma to the head when someone falls. And this is known as the population-based approach to injury reduction, as I mentioned, the A, B, C, and S, or you could say or S. But each one of these is a separate population. So I just want to help enforce or reinforce for those of you who are familiar with this that this is not an injury risk assessment tool. This is a population-based approach to injury reduction. So it was very innovative, the work that we started doing with IHI back in 2006, the very first toolkit published in 2008, that really targeted 4 populations that if they were to have a fall, it didn't matter what type of fall, It didn't matter what score they were on the screening scale. Because remember, those screening scales are only related to one type of fall, the anticipated physiological fall. This is any fall that one of these populations might have could result in loss of function or loss of life. So we knew from our clinical experience and from the literature that there were 4 populations that if they were to fall, it could be really, really bad. So what are these 4 populations? There's people that are over the age of 85 or have frailty. That's the age group. People who are at risk for fracture or already have a history of a fracture or have osteoporosis. That's your B group. The third group are those people who are anticoagulated or have a bleeding disorder, and that's the anticoagulation group, your C group, or someone who is post-op. Because we all know that a patient who's post-op who falls, it is just a disaster when that happens. And you could do special procedures as well. Think about new moms that fall. Oh my gosh, those are awful too. So, but these are the 4 populations that we went after. But even as I address each one of these as a separate population, you could combine them and think about that 85-year-old who comes into your hospital because of a fall, has osteoporosis, is anticoagulated, and now is going to have hip surgery because that person just broke a hip. So you could go to the tip of the pyramid where you put all 3 of these together, these attributes, if you will, attributes specific to injury risk if any type of fall might happen. And that's when you're painting the picture of someone who's really, really vulnerable. So again, each one of these is a population-based approach to injury reduction, and what do you do for each one of them? So colleagues, when you're going after injury reduction, we developed, in working with IHI, universal injury prevention strategies. So think about these and see what you think, because this might be your way of doing an environmental assessment, which is what I do a lot when I get to visit hospitals. So, you do want to take every opportunity to be able to educate patients and families, because we all know from the literature that 60% of the falls happen at home, 30% in the community, and only 10% in our care. So still, for someone to fall in our care, it is rare, because who's got 24/7 care around them with all these eyes and arms around and all this help to be able to help them at home? No one has that. So that's why most of the falls happen at home. So you want to take every opportunity that you can to teach people about what to do to be safe from falls, and if they were to fall, to make sure that they can get rescued, and anything that they can do to be able to reduce their risk of injury if they were to fall at home. It's all about creating that safe environment at home and their interaction within their environment. And there's a lot of resources now to help with that patient education. So I talk about that in relationship to emergency departments and waiting areas and getting ready to sign into a hospital, or waiting areas in a primary care clinic or a busy outpatient clinic setting where you could actually have this education material that you could just make available to people that they can review it while they're sitting there, have access to it. So you want to take every opportunity to help teach people about what to do to keep them safe, especially old people when you know that they're repeat fallers and they're at risk for injury. So then the next thing that you want to do in universal injury prevention is this is when you start looking at any opportunity for someone to hit a sharp edge if they were to fall, no matter where they are. If they're walking down a hallway, are there any sources of sharp edges if they were to fall and lose their footing and maybe lose their balance or have a syncopal episode? And sometimes I see sharp edges that could even be in a hallway with some of those drop-down computer boxes that people will have in the hallway. They're not always lifted back up when someone's not standing there. There's other sources that you will find too. Sometimes it's boxes that are out there that are holding gloves on the outside of a room, or different kinds of equipment holders, or the sharp edges in a bathroom. When you look at these metal shelves that people might have in bathrooms, or metal towel racks, or metal coat hangers, or the gowns, the bathroom robe, or any kind of clothing hooks that you would see in a bathroom that could be metal, that could create an opportunity for someone to have a laceration. So any source of laceration you want to be able to remove, or be able to buffer by maybe padding them, or replacing them with plastic, and with that plastic going ahead and making sure it's rounded edges. The next thing you want to do is to look for the potential for trauma impact. So if someone was to fall from a bed, are they going to hit the hard surfaces? Most of us have tile floors, and we don't have padded flooring like you might have in some nursing homes where the patient rooms have carpet, but we don't have that in hospitals. So looking at the possibility for using protective equipment, so you're improving the protective barriers that are in place to be able to reduce trauma. So what are those? Those are hip protectors, floor mats, and we can include helmets in this as well. So you'll see right here, the very first choice that we have is looking at creating a safe environment. The second choice that we have for reducing the potential for trauma is equipment that you need to be able to have to put at the point of care. So this is very different. When you're going after injury reduction, protecting people from injury, it is separate and distinct from fall prevention. This is if someone was to fall, no matter where they are, no matter how they fall, are they going to sustain a serious injury? So that's why we have to look at the ability to have equipment that we know is protective and have it at the point of care. So you will oftentimes have to do an assessment of your capacity. How much do you need? How many people over the age of 85 do you currently have in your hospital today? Or how many people in your hospital today have already come in and have a fractured hip as part of their history? You need to know what your needs are and then your capacity to be able to meet those needs by protecting people. So this is getting equipment on board and then using it. And then the next thing that we want to do is to combine multifactorial approaches. And this is where you're combining interventions. So that if you have someone who's coming in and they're being admitted into your facility, you want to make sure they're getting out of bed towards their stronger side, and that would be the side that they would be that would have their floor mat down. Making sure you're assessing them for proper gait and balance to make sure that they're going to be safe. And if they do have sensory neuropathy issues, to make sure that you evaluate their ability to stand properly on that floor mat, if you will. So it's combining interventions. And then even hourly rounding. And the hourly rounding that we're talking about here is making sure we do scheduled toileting for those people who need it. If they're getting pain medications, to make sure that they're toileted before their pain medications. The ones that are going to, interventions that are going to help you with fall prevention. And then looking at that environment, again, that safe exit side, but if someone's getting out of bed towards one side, that's the preferred side, to make sure that they're not going to, if they were to lose their balance, that they're not going to fall and hit that bedside table or that bedside little nightstand that they have. So that includes being able to reduce the amount of furniture that's around someone's bedside exit side. So that's what that's about. So again, we have the ABCS, and these were selected, these 4 populations, is because we knew if they fell, that their fall could result in moderate to serious injury. Now, mind you, even minor injury in old people can be grave because of the consequences that are associated with that. So I just want to make sure that I know that you're reporting all injuries, but these populations were those selected because we knew if they fell, they could have loss of function or loss of life. So that's why I focused on those people with moderate to serious injury risk. So what we did in working with IHI is we created this tool to take back to your units. And maybe some of you have done this already on the call. But this is a injury risk and fall risk matrix. And this matrix was designed to work with your nursing staff and go through the patients on a unit in a given day and place each patient into one of these quadrants. I, quite frankly, don't know anybody that's in that green zone. And the green zone is people who would come into our care and they're not at risk for falls and they're not at risk for injury. So what I say is that most patients in hospitals are high fall risk, but either way, they're at risk for falls. So they're in the yellow quadrant, and then what we do is we give them, we start giving them Coumadin. They're now going to be on Coumadin. Someone's come in and they got atrial fib, and now they're going to be on Coumadin. So they just moved on over to that red quadrant on the top right corner. Or you could have someone who came in, and let's just say on what screening tool you use in your organization, that maybe they're not at risk for fall. Again, that's only for one type of fall because anyone can have an accident. Even some people can still have a syncopal episode. But let's just say we have someone that's not at risk for fall, so they come in, and we know that they've got osteoporosis. And then we go ahead and give this patient Ambien for sleep. Well, this patient, again, just moved from that orange quadrant up to the red quadrant. So this is a tool to take back to your units and help your staff start appreciating who is most vulnerable on our unit. Who on our unit is both at risk for fall and at risk for injury, or has a history of a fall-related injury, and start knowing your risk. This enables organizations to start risk adjusting to know the severity of injury and fall risk of the patient population on your unit. So think about a hospice patient population. In hospice, isn't everybody in the red quadrant? I mean, everybody's high fall risk, and everybody's at risk for injury if they're not bleeding risk or they're not osteoporotic from the medications for their cancer treatment. But what you want to now start doing is look at someone who's already had a fall injury. Who's had that hip fracture already? And you're still getting to identifying those patients who are more vulnerable than others. But we wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to start really appreciating that it's not just about fall risk, it's about injury risk and knowing your patient population. Because the people at risk for injury or already have a fall-related injury, those are the ones you have to protect. You've got to protect them with those floor mats and those hip protectors and possibly those helmets. And you remember, too, when we talked last time about the Joint Commission Sentinel Alert that came out in September of 2015, that all patients who come into our care should be assessed not just for their fall risk factors, but for their injury risk and their injury history. So this matrix can help you be able to do this in working with your nursing staff. So colleagues, on these slides now, what you'll start seeing is a bundled approach to the populations, each of these populations, for what we need to have in place to help protect them. It is about protecting from the fall, but if they are going to fall, making sure that they don't have a serious injury. So the interventions that you see listed here, you're not going to find clinical trials to support in terms of the strength of the evidence every one of these interventions. But what we know from expert opinion, and that's how these were decided, the interventions to bundle for each of these populations, is they went out to the field of fall injury prevention experts, been working with IHI to confirm that these interventions should be implemented. So if you are going to implement the A, B, C, or S bundles, you need to be ready for this, because to go after protecting people over the age of 85, you need to have hip protectors on board. You need to have floor mats on board. And I have talked with organizations that have put the ADCS in their fall risk assessment protocols, but they don't have hip protectors yet, and they don't have floor mats yet. So, you know, again, when you're implementing these interventions for these populations, you have to be ready. You have to be able to get, you know, this is infrastructure and capacity to be able to help protect them. So many of you will remember when IHI was working on the bundle for reducing ventilator-associated pneumonias in the ICU. Well, when you look at the bundle of what they were implementing for that, all the bundle components were not based on randomized controlled trials. Some of them were based on making sure there was expert opinion that was saying that these are things that we should be doing as part of the bundle. So that's kind of the same approach when you go forward here. So you have someone who comes in, and they're 85 years and older, or people with frailty. Of course, you always want to teach back. You know, you want to educate them and make sure that they can teach you back, and that starts helping you appreciate already, can they be a full partner in your fall prevention program. But you want to make sure that if they're using assistive devices at home and they've been safe with them, that you have them within reach, that they should have their devices within reach. These are people that should have hip protectors on. Remember, there's all kinds of hip protectors that are out there. There's male and female versions of undergarments. There's incontinent briefs. There's just so many products. And then they've got clothing. And then the floor mats. And the floor mats are the padded mats that go next to the patient's bed. They're only down when someone's resting in bed, so that they fall from bed, that absorbs trauma, and you reduce the severity of injury that someone could experience as falling from a bed. You want to have these patients in height-adjustable beds, and the bed should only be in a low position when someone's resting. If the patient's getting ready to stand up or transfer, you want to make sure that the bed is raised up to the proper height for that patient, because we know that the height of a bed for someone to stand up if they're 5 foot tall is very different than someone who's 6 foot tall like me. So, you know, having height-adjustable beds is really essential. We just talked about that safe exit side, where you make sure people get out of bed towards their strong, unaffected side. And that's because we know people are going to get up out of bed without us. If they get up out of bed without us, you sure don't want them getting out of bed towards their hemiparetic side. So you want them getting out of bed, if you will, towards their unaffected or their stronger side. And then, of course, we're still going to review medications, because we know medications contribute to fall risk, So this medication review has to be done by someone who has that body of knowledge to evaluate, is there anything we can do to modify these medications to reduce their fall risk, at the same time be able to manage those comorbidities. So that's the medication review. So that's people over the age of 85 or frail. For people who come in and they have osteoporosis, or they already have had a hip fracture, or they're osteopenic and they're falling multiple times. It could be one more next time that they fall, depending on the height and the velocity of that fall, that they could break that bone still, even if they're osteopenic. So what do we want to do for these patients? We want to be able to order hip protectors and get them wearing hip protectors. At least give it a try. Work with them for them, because we know hip protectors absorb trauma, and they reduce the amount of trauma that makes it to the bone. You still want these patients to be in height adjustable beds and make sure it's height adjusted. And for people who are cognitively intact and functionally independent, you don't necessarily need to put them in a low bed. The low bed is for people you worry are going to get up out of bed without you. They can't be a full partner in their fall prevention program. You want to reduce the amount of distance that someone falls when they roll out of bed. But for people who are cognitively alert and functionally independent, you don't necessarily need to put them in a low bed. So you want to consider that. You're still going to use the floor mat. If they do get up without you, you want to be able to protect them and pad that flooring. But still, it's not just about the padding. For people with osteoporosis, we want to evaluate them to make sure that they can be treated. And this is a gender disparate issue for men, because women absolutely get evaluated and treated for osteoporosis, but for men who even fall and break hips, they don't get offered treatment for osteoporosis. So that's why we built into this bundle to make sure that people do get evaluated for osteoporosis and help people get treated. And, dispel the myth that this is not just a disease of women. For people who are anticoagulated, we would, I ran falls clinics for years from 1999 to 2016, and we would get patients who would be sent to our falls clinic and evaluated to see whether or not they should stay anticoagulated because they're falling so much, or they're refusing to use their walker or their cane. So sometimes you have to evaluate the use of anticoagulants. What's the risk of having an embolic episode versus a hemorrhage if they were to fall and hit their head, bleed? So there's very little literature in terms of that risk-benefit analysis, but the literature that is out there that is dated back to the 1980s says that the patient has to fall like 250 sometimes in a year for the risk of having a hemorrhagic bleed due to a fall to outweigh the purpose of having an anticoagulant to help be able to prevent that embolic episode. So the point of that is that many older people are under anticoagulated. So it's just a matter of making sure that they're educated about what to do if they were to fall, and if they're anticoagulated, to know what to do to monitor their bleeding and help make sure they tell their provider that they've had this fall. And we have a patient education brochure on what to do if you fall because you're on blood thinners, what to be able and to teach them about this. That was done. That's at the VA, the Vision 8 Patient Safety Center website. And then if someone does have a traumatic brain injury already and they're anticoagulated, absolutely you want to get them into helmets, because helmets absorb trauma. You don't need a randomized controlled trial to know that. I mean, people who are on bicycles are wearing helmets. Not everyone that would have motorcycles have helmets, but certainly we know that helmets reduce trauma. When you look at football players and others, that we know that helmets reduce trauma to the head. There's not a whole lot of science surrounding wheelchair users, but anti-tippers are absolutely a winner. You can take the anti-tippers, you can put them on the back of a wheelchair, prevent the wheelchair from tipping backwards, and they can also be placed on the front of a wheelchair to help someone not fall forward. They could still fall forward if they bend at the waist and topple over, but the wheelchair itself, it helps prevent it from falling over, but anti-tippers are just a winner. And then for your surgical population, you want to make sure that you teach them so well before their surgery about what to do to make sure that they're an informed partner in your fall prevention program about why it's important to call for help and what could happen if they choose not to, or if they might overestimate their abilities. So we want to educate them before their procedure and then evaluate that they still retain that knowledge after the procedure. So that's the post-op education. So you want to have a formal pre-op education program for fall prevention for the surgical population, evaluate their retention of what you taught them post-op, reinforce the things that they didn't remember, because not everybody's paying attention and they're worried and they're wondering what's going on with their family. So you want to make sure that you do have that post-op evaluation. And then certainly for pain medications is to offer them to toilet before they get a pain medication, because you don't want people getting up to go to the bathroom once they've got these centrally acting pain meds on board. So with that being said, you will increase the frequency of your roundings, because for some of these patients, even hourly rounding is going to be too long. So you want to be able to individualize what you're doing for patients who are post-surgical. And for some of you, too, it might not be surgical. It could be post-procedural patients. And I think about that when I'm talking with ambulatory care, outpatient one-day surgery or procedure clinics in a hospital where they're doing colonoscopies. And you have colonoscopies in patients who are coming in, older people that are coming in, and, you know, they're post-procedure management. So it's all really important in being protective and anticipating that anybody could fall anytime in your care, and what could happen if this was to happen to this one patient. So we have this third polling question, and we'd like to ask you, those of you on the call, which approaches are you using to integrate injury risk already? Because this work from IHI is not new. This has been around since 2003. Or excuse me, 2008, the very first toolkit, and we updated it in 2012. It was released in February of 2013. So we've got, I see, this is great. We've got 13 people on the call, so let me just see if I can, let me see here, if I can go ahead and make this bigger so I can see this. So we've got, of the 13 people on the call, we'll just take another couple minutes here. So this is great. We figured that some of you were using this already. So I hope that for those of you who are using this, we have 5 people who are using the A, B, C, or S population, that you have those interventions for each of the bundles in place, that you're using the IHI matrix. That's really great. And that is a really great tool for the staff. Because when I walk onto a unit, what I want people to tell me is who on your unit has already had a hip fracture, who on your unit is already anticoagulated, who on your unit has already fallen. You know, that's getting to identifying who's really vulnerable and moving people into a population-based approach. It's not just everybody being high fall risk, if you will. So this is great. I think we have 10 people that have responded, so I think we can probably go on to the next one then.
So Pat, one thing?
Yeah.
Just one thing. I'd like to ask the group, those of you that have used the floor mats that Pat was talking about, what if you could please chat in what your experience is, because I know that there are other hospitals that are considering the fall mats, and it would be good to get a little bit of feedback from the group on who's using them and what their experience is. So any of you that are using floor mats, if you could just chat that in. Also the same with the hip protectors. Those are 2 questions that have come from some of the participants. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Martha. And again, I'm not seeing where people are typing in. I'm not sure which of the boxes it's in, so I'm not able to see that. So if you see some responses, if you could share, that would be great, Martha. And then you'll see on this next slide, too. Yeah, that's great. So you'll see on the next slide what we wanted to know, because we knew some of you were using the A, B, C, or S approach to injury reduction, is we would like to know the actions that you've taken since the conferences. You know, and that you to plan and implement this. If there's anything that you have done since, if you participate in the conference, any of you who are on the call, and any of the experience that you've had with integrating the injury risk into your assessment protocols. We are hoping that this is being done because that's part of that Joint Commission Sentinel Alert, is that everyone gets assessed not just for fall risk but injury risk. So if you're having some experience doing that, and then using the injury matrix, we'd love to know about your experiences and how you're doing that for those of you who responded. And then any lessons learned to increase adoption and spread, because you know, this is a community of learning, so we'd love for people to share. So if there's anybody who'd like to share too, if you don't want to just chat, I think people can talk because we have an open line, right?
Oh, that's true. So yes, you don't have to chat in. You can talk verbally and share your ideas. A couple of the things that we're seeing, though, Pat, in the chat box is
Uh-huh.
Will, and he said that since the workshop they have started using the ABC or S population approach. So, Will, would you be willing to share some of your feedback with how that's going? Okay, and then we also see that some people that are using the chair alarms, and what was the other thing? I'm sorry here. Reminder bells. And Pat, maybe do we have any, would you have any feedback on either of those for the group?
Just say what those two were again.
The reminder bells and chair alarms.
Well, the issue with the alarms is alarms help with preventing the fall, maybe. The research that's been done is about bed alarms, and we know bed alarms don't prevent falls. They were designed to help get you there fast. So really, any of these should be designed to help to remind them of doing something. But, when you look at the people who are getting them, they're oftentimes people with some cognitive impairment. So making sure that they understand what the lights are or the belts are, the belt alarms or the chair alarms are is really important. But there's a whole emphasis on trying to reduce alarm fatigue. So being very clear about the patient population that you use these for, but their intent is for fall prevention. It's not for injury reduction. So the focus of what we're doing today is to try and get to injury reduction. So that's why we want to make sure that even for those people you worry are going to get up out of a chair without you, which is why you put a bed alarm on or a chair alarm, and the tab alarm, that, you could put a floor mat in front of them if you were to worry that they would topple in front of that chair just getting up without you, because it doesn't prevent all falls. So those would just be the couple of comments that I would make about that.
This is Will speaking.
Hey, Will, how are you?
I just put the phone on. I've been listening through the computer. The couple of things that we did when I came back is, we are desperate to drop the fall rate. I mean, our risk rate is thankfully extremely low, but we want to keep it that way, thank you, if not lower. The one thing that we did is we made a hospital-wide huddle, and we educated everybody. What I used is what I learned from the workshop, and I asked the staff, for instance, why do people fall? And it was amazing. I mean, exactly like the workshop, because the patient is non-compliant, because he went to the bathroom, because he didn't wait. And once we changed that understanding, that's not why they fell. That kind of opened their eyes. And every morning at the huddle now, we ask them, okay, patient in room 126, why is he a high fall risk? And that is, I don't know if that has made the difference, but to me, I can see the understanding in the staff. And that has been great.
Oh, good for you. Good work.
So we found that, understanding and education is very important. And then what we also are doing now on a monthly basis, we're taking the falls and we're putting them in the 3 buckets: the environmental bucket, the known factor bucket, and the one that you can't anticipate, like a heart attack. Again, just to bring the awareness of the staff. And also we are asking them to adjust. We have IPOCs, which is an integrated plan of care. So when they do their assessment, again, teaching them the difference between screening and assessment, because how can we help our patients if we don't truly understand what we can do to help our patients? And that's
exactly.
The part I mentioned earlier on is about the patient not, the patient said, you mean you're not cross with us? Because we asked them, what happened this time that you fell? You've been walking okay. What happened this time? And then again, so our staff themselves didn't even realize that, oh, you fell again, or get that body language of why did you do it kind of thing. So to us, it's just the awareness and the education. And we trust that that will make a difference. For what it's worth, and I don't want to jinx anything, but our fall rate is lower than since the workshop. So
very good. And that would be the fall rate based on what type of fall, Will?
Well, we find that of the falls we've had, one was environmental and the others had the known risk factors because the staff didn't understand the concept of the postural hypotension. So now that they know that the education of the patient is not just please call us, but if you are going to sit upright, don't get up straight away because of the following. So the education is huge.
Yes, it is. Well, you're doing a great job, and thank you so much for sharing this wonderful progress that you're making.
Well, I trust it's going to carry on that way.
We're with you all the way. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
Pat, just one other.
Yeah,
just one other thing before you go on, because I know that our time is running out here. But also, Kate Connolly did chat in that they've been working very hard on the education of not only the Housewide Falls Council, but also senior leadership, and including them in a lot of the education materials. So, and also they are getting ready to, they're going to be using the Morse scale, and they're going to be going live with that on June 28th. So,
excellent.
And looking at the assessment of the patient that does have a positive screen. So, to the point that you have made, to go ahead and, the Morse scale is not the end all, that it is just a trigger to go ahead and assess the patient further. So great work, Kate. We appreciate you sharing that. And Pat, we probably should move forward with the unit-based champions.
You got it. So thank you again, colleagues. You're making such great progress. So I love talking about unit-based champions because, it has gone to the innovation diffusion model, this role. And it's, unit-based champions is not new. Many of you who've been in nursing, I've been in nursing for over 40 years, and I remember pain resource nurses, and I remember unit-based skin nurses, so these aren't new. But when you look at the research, and it dates back to 2001, as you'll see here, that peer leadership at the unit level offers the potential to reduce the occurrence of injurious falls by decreasing the variations in practice. And this is why it's so important, because it is so hard to make sure that you have a sense of fidelity, that everybody's doing things as it should be done and everybody's doing it the same way, which is reliability. So when you don't have fidelity, you don't have reliability, then you have variations in practice. So peer leadership has also been successful in terms of health context, mainly with working with adolescent populations and persons with chronic illness. So we have a lot of opportunity to contribute to this body of knowledge. So we have had a unit peer leader program and toolkit that we've been implementing in the VA. I implemented one with medical surgical units and also with units that were psychiatry units to build the infrastructure and capacity to build peer leaders. Because these are people at the unit that are people who are respected, people who can champion change, and they're engaged. So I'm just sharing with you very briefly here the outline of what we have in our peer leader program, where we have information for who is a peer leader, their contact information, who are the people that they're working with, so information on their roles and responsibilities, how to select someone, how can a unit select who's going to be the peer leader for fall prevention on my unit, and then developing their unit-based fall for injury prevention action plan, because they're the ones that are going to help work with a nurse manager and maybe a clinical nurse leader on implementing their action plan at the unit level, maybe through their unit practice council. And then keeping track of meetings, because they're going to run meetings. They have to keep track of, how well are we doing implementing floor mats? What are we doing with hip protectors? How are we doing with the post-fall huddle? So those are action plans that we want to implement at the unit level to get things adopted and make sure that they're part of our culture. And then equipment information. What equipment do you need to have? And having brochures for that, training people on the use of equipment. So there's the peer leader information and the unit peer leader information. And then we also have the components of the manual, making sure people know policies and procedures for fall for injury prevention, guidelines and algorithms. Maybe some of you are using gate belts or the alarms that we heard, and how are you using them, and any algorithms to see which patients they should be used with. Handoff communication is an important component, that we're not just talking about someone being high fall risk, but why are people at risk for falls, and making sure that that gets part of the handoff. Anything that's happened that makes someone more or less at risk for falls. How are we using signage, not just for fall risk, but, people who get admitted because of a fall or people who fell in our care or someone who already has an injury. Getting after those safety huddles, the post-fall huddles. Any recommendations that come from the huddle that maybe the peer leader can work with the staff to start looking at trends along with the nurse manager? And then keeping a log on what changes have we made as a result of that post-fall huddle and how is it getting implemented? There's nothing more frustrating than coming up with some interventions and ideas for making changes and then just have it fall by the wayside because people haven't kept up with it. We all agree that this is something we should do, but we haven't kept up with it. So you have to have some monitoring, and that's the program staff and the unit peer leader monitoring program that they're going to be able to follow through to make sure things get resolved or ideas get adopted and at least try it on your PDSA cycle. And you want to train people, because just because you have a peer leader doesn't mean they're ready to go and launch the program. So you can do a whole training program, which is what I've done across our VAs, is to try and help with building the capacity and infrastructure for the unit peer leaders to have confidence and competencies. And you'll see that in their job descriptions or position descriptions, and then resources for them. So this has also been integrated into the ARC Falls Toolkit in 2013. We've done this for a long time in the VA through My Patient Safety Center. But David Gans and others, they have a whole section, and it's quite a lot of material in the Falls Toolkit on the role of unit peer leaders. So in Section 4, they have a section on how to implement your fall prevention program, and they have the peer leaders there, the unit peer leaders. So they become members of the implementation team. Who's going to affect change? They belong to both that team, but also their unit team, and they also serve as critical communication links to make sure everybody knows, for example, that postural hypotension, that this is the day we're changing our practice and everybody's going to do it the same way, and keep on top of that. And then define what ongoing communication and reporting is needed. So the unit-based champion helps with that, working with the implementation team. So what role do they play? Well, they're the ones familiar with the program goals and the care processes and the outcomes data. They're familiar with what we're doing as a committee for our hospital, but also at our unit level. They're the go-to person at the unit level for staff. When they have questions that they would go to them, they become their resource person. They may even be the one who's going to post some results, like, what have we learned after doing these post-fall huddles and what changes in practice are we making, and report that progress back to the staff, maybe through staff meetings or, little safety huddles that we might be doing on our unit. And then they provide updates in staff meetings as well. And they're cheerleaders, so you want to have someone who's one of those early adopters when you look at the innovation diffusion model. But it is important to have more than one person, because you don't want to have a peer leader program fall apart because one person leaves or moves to another unit. When you look at the characteristics of selection for a peer leader, these are some of the things that we built into our selection. You'll see it in the ARC toolkit as well. But you want to have someone who really is going to be enthusiastic and really move your patient safety program forward. So you can look through that. So we have another poll question. We'd like to know how many of you at your unit level actually have a peer leader as part of your fall prevention program. So even just in the beginning, as we start seeing at this poll, you'll see that we have some opportunity. So this might be something that you want to consider. One of the interventions that actually rolled out as part of our Safe Patient Handling and Movement program that I know you're very familiar with, reducing back injuries in the nursing staff, that many units got Safe Patient Handling Movement or back injury resource nurses or coordinators. They weren't all full-time, so many of the Safe Patient Handling Movement coordinators or back injury resource nurses that I know have also taken on falls. So that's a way of being able to look at your peer leaders. But again, a peer leader is really someone at that unit level. So that's close. So we can see that we have opportunities. So maybe this is something that you'll think about. We'd also like to know, how does your, for those of you who said yes, is how does your unit identify the peer leader? So if you could select one of those. A volunteer, a role on the unit. We'll have a couple people who responded. Yeah, we've had people that have come forward because they know, they know someone in their family that's had a fall, and you find someone that has this personal experience with falls and really want to take this on. So that's a start, but there's different ways to be able to identify them. And a peer leader doesn't have to be an RN. It could be a nursing assistant. It could be an LPN. But remember, whoever you select for a peer leader, depending on their knowledge and skills, you may have to be able to do some training for them and help prepare them for this role. So you just can't assign someone. We'll go ahead and close that one out, I think. Making sure that we help prepare them when we know that we're going to go ahead and move forward with this unit peer leader program. So I think we'll go ahead and do the sharing next time because I know we only have a couple minutes left, but we would love to know more about your peer leader programs, and if you want to take an opportunity to chat this in, or maybe some of your plans related to peer leaders, we would like to know about that. So with that, we all know that we accomplish more together, and the peer leaders really help us with this, and we'd like to just take a few minutes to hear if you have any questions, or, what are you going to do by next Tuesday we'd like to know about as well. So the lines are open if anybody wants to share.
Will again?
Well, please share with us.
The unit-based peer leader, I find they are very reluctant because they see it, I don't know why, they see it as a negative at this stage because it's like the acknowledgement that something is wrong. So that's one thing I'd like to look at a little bit more. We're having our first meeting with the medical guys to give feedback on what we have done. So that's our plan. In fact, that's tomorrow. We're having that meeting tomorrow. We're having a fall meeting, our monthly meeting. But I want to look more into the peer, bringing them up. And I like the number 5, the one that missed the meeting. I was thinking more of pick the ones that have had the falls because they've had first-hand experience. You mentioned like somebody who's family, but I think the staff whose patients have fallen, I would like to embrace them to make them see, look, you can do things to make a difference. Not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and you give it a try. Try it on one unit, and you have to help a peer leader become successful, realizing it's not going to just be one person, and maybe be able to have 2 people that are going to launch it together. And then, as you build your program, help them be able to start training other units that want to come forward. But maybe consider starting with the units that have the high fall rate, and work with the nurse manager and helping this be something that they're going to be rewarded for.
Yeah, I'll work with her on that one.
Yeah.
I think it's well worth it.
It is, absolutely. We found the peer leaders to be really helpful with the adoption of floor mats as well as hip protectors, because no one wants a patient to fall and break a hip. Everybody feels terrible to fall and hit their head and die. Everybody feels terrible. So anything that you can do, and if you're very focused on one specific intervention, then you help them be able to be successful with that, launching the floor mats or the hip protectors with one patient that comes in with a hip fracture or one person who's got dementia, is impulsive and trying to get up. You start small and try and build success.
True.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And for anyone else, and so Martha, did you want to close?
I did want to just add a couple of things. One is you can see there that our next session is on July 5th, and the focus is on proactive toileting and also pain management and toileting. And so this would be a really, really great opportunity to engage those peer champions. So I'd really like to ask each of the hospitals to really consider that, and maybe you can bring a peer champion with you on the call next time. The other thing is I wanted to be sure that everyone was aware that we do have a webinar next week on June 16th that is related to our patient-family engagement webinar series, and that is, how we engage our patient and families in the care that we give them or we work with them on. And so just wanted to put it out there. If you're interested and available, you may want to check that out. And that link is in the CalHEN newsletter. It's right there on the screen. It is also available. You can just shoot us an email and we can send it to you. So we want to thank you all for your time today. And Pat, thanks so much for all the information on the population-based bundles. That is great. And I did hear, Will, you mentioned that, you know, sometimes when we talk about the unit-based champions, we tend to take the person that volunteers all the time. And really, this is an opportunity to really just go a little bit further and give other people on the unit an opportunity, and I think to participate. And I think, Will, you brought up a great strategy in that looking at the units that have falls, and maybe there's someone in particular on that unit that would be interested in stepping forward. So if you have any questions, it's a 101, so I would, stay here and I will answer any questions that come into the chat box, but we are going to be closing out the webinar. And again, want to thank you, Pat, for your expertise, and thank all of our participants today for taking the time to join us in the call. Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
week.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.